Well, you've just completed watching about 98 minutes of the first presidential debate of 2020 with Joseph Biden and President Donald J. Trump. You see the First Lady there going over to congratulate President Trump on what I would say is a pretty good job. Welcome back here to our studios at OAN. I want to welcome along Alex and Greta with me. And the first thing I got to say about watching that whole 98-minute fiasco, I brought something with me for Chris Wallace. This is some tissue. Chris should use that to get the brown stuff off of his nose. I'm sorry, but I've been a journalist for 22 years, now turned talk show host, so I do have commentary and I put opinion on this air on my show, as you do, Alex. But I watch a trusted journalist with Fox News sit there for the last 90-some minutes, cut the President of the United States off, allow Joseph Biden to call him a clown 2 to 3 times, interrupt the President, and not call Joe on any of his lies, interrupt him, and I timed it with our clock, allowed him to go well over his 2 minutes on many subject matters from climate to the voting record, and we'll get to that in a second about the vote count. So my takeaway from this is, President did a good job, Joe showed up a little better than they thought, but the biggest disgrace of the night was the moderator, to me. Chris Wallace did not do any justice to the debate stage here and controlling both men, but then also being fair with both men. Whoever wins this is going to be the next leader of our country. We deserve to hear from both of them equally, not adding your personal opinion in, which is what Chris Wallace did tonight. Disgrace to the industry. That's my takeaway. We'll get to some of the quotes in a minute. Guys, yours.
Yeah, I think when you look at that as well, I mean, there wasn't a lot of substance necessarily tonight. I think from both sides, it was a lot of talking over each other. I think that it was a hard situation for Chris Wallace to be in. But for example, to your point, I mean, his quote in the Washington Post where he said he wanted to be invisible as a debate moderator. Tonight, he was anything but. It seemed like oftentimes it was President Trump versus Chris Wallace. Then it would be Chris Wallace facilitating a comment from Joe Biden, not necessarily those two candidates going at each other. And when they did, it was a lot of talking over one another. So I think for the American people tonight might have been a little bit of a letdown. I don't think they got to see the two contrasting ideologies.
Well, totally. And President Trump 100% noticed that. He said to Chris Wallace at one point, am I debating you or him? He totally noticed, you know, you're interrupting me. You're letting Joe Biden speak. You're not letting me speak. You're not letting me. He asked him multiple times, do I get the 2-minute rebuttal or not? Do I get to respond to what he just said, or do I just have to move on? Chris Wallace made him just continue to move on.
This is what President Trump has dealt with for almost 4 years in office, a biased media. Let's be real, folks. You've seen it at home. You see the headlines. You click on the clickbait the media puts out there. You read a headline, you open it, you read the article, and the substance of the actual story, the facts, the truth, don't match the headline. Chris Wallace said he was going to be a fair moderator tonight. He was anything but fair. The president didn't get a fair shake again. A couple good lines, though, and we've heard this before, but I think Trump got the best one of the night. I've done more in 47 months than you've done in 47 years, Joe. Yeah. We've all seen that. We know that. That's something where Joe Biden, I don't think, can stand on his record, because in 47 years of service, not building anything, not creating jobs, but being a public servant, when has he put service before self? Well, being a veteran, that's something that a lot of us vets out there know about. Putting service first.
And it's an interesting, you know, President Trump said that when they were talking about his tax issue, that the New York Times story. Wallace brought that up while they were talking about the candidates' records. And President Trump said, hey, I was a businessman. I took advantage of the tax code. I took advantage of the tax code that was in place under the Obama-Biden administration. Why didn't you fix it when you were a senator? Why didn't the Obama administration fix it when you were in office under President Obama and in charge of the Senate at the time? Biden has this 47-year-long record in politics, and what has he done, and how has he made any difference? Now he says, okay, I am going to come in and I am going to make a difference. President Trump says, hey, I've done more than you if in 47 months compared to your 47 years, and he does have the record to stand on.
And if I could build on that point as well, I think that there was instances such as that New York Times tax story where there was more of a simple answer that could have been explained, such as for President Trump saying, it's one thing to be losing money in the public sector, as I am when I'm president, right, compared to making money in the public sector, which is what happened with Joe Biden, or at least the allegation against him. But I want to talk about Chris Wallace one more moment before we move on from this,
because by all means.
There were a couple times, for example, where he wouldn't fact check. And I think it was when Joe Biden, for example, said Hunter Biden didn't take money from the Moscow mayor's wife. He didn't take money from Ukraine, Burisma, things of that. But I mean, just last week, we saw a Senate intelligence report come out with those same very allegations. But what bothered me is when Chris Wallace was the one who was parroting the hoaxes. I mean, I made a list of it. I mean, he didn't push back against Biden when he brought up the bleach comment by President Trump,
right.
The losers and suckers comment regarding the Atlantic story for the media.
The losers and suckers comment, only 4 or 5 anonymous sources wouldn't even go on the record. 25 people that were there have gone on the record and say never happened.
But even worse is Chris Wallace brought up the Charlottesville comments, which at this point I think anybody who has seen those clips knows what happened. So it wasn't necessarily just that he was refusing to push back or fact-checking, because it was a hard job to do that, but he was the one bringing up some of these issues.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he was facilitating the left's argument, which Chris Wallace, who works at Fox, and a lot of people think that network leans to the right, not so much anymore. You have an anchor right there who obviously was favoring the Democratic candidate. And I'm so glad you brought up that very fine people comment. I wish we could pull that up so that the American people would see 36 seconds after that comment was made about very fine people when the president, yes, laid it out for everybody that there was fine folks on both sides and explained what he meant. And then, by the way, he condemned white nationalists and the KKK, and just this past week, named Antifa and the KKK as terror groups. So excuse me, Chris Wallace, but again, you were defending Biden. You were going after the president. Again, you allowed Joe Biden to call the president of the United States a clown 2 or 3 times, and then allowed all kinds of lies from Biden to go out there like there is no evidence of voter fraud. Really. OAN has just reported this week on the voter fraud in Minneapolis, where they are harvesting the ballots in Ilhar Omar's district, over 300 of them from Somali refugees and the elderly. It's a fact. The Minneapolis police opened the case today or yesterday afternoon. What the president was talking about, ballots thrown out in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, in the ditch, in the trash. And Joe says it didn't happen, there's no proof. Wallace knows these stories are true, doesn't call Biden out. You're a disgrace. All right, I want to get Jenn Pellegrino's take on this. She was there. She joins us now live from outside of the hall in Cleveland. So how is the atmosphere there after? Because we know this is not your normal debate type of stage. You told us before, I think only 60 or 70 folks were allowed in the crowd. Kind of give us a little play-by-play of what you thought.
That's right, Dan. Well, it's certainly been a little bit quieter out here in the tents. Everybody kind of retreated to their trailers, or they went inside if they were with the campaign. There's a few reporters still out here right now, but I don't want to speak on behalf of our viewers, but I would assume maybe after watching that debate, they would love to see an OAN correspondent or anchor moderate a debate with President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. Certainly, you know, as you mentioned, it was very soft on Joe Biden. We saw the president doing most of the fact-checking, most of the grilling towards Joe Biden. I don't think anybody was surprised at the lack of fairness in this debate. We saw it with the president's interview with Chris Wallace several weeks back when Chris really tried to grill the president on a number of issues, and we see all these softball questions lobbed at Joe Biden. You know, I think all those press lids that we've seen Joe Biden call in Wilmington, I think that was his campaign feeding him a lot of talking points, which we saw this evening, and really something he couldn't really stand up to the president. One thing that, you know, we heard a lot about, of course, is law and order, and we're hearing Joe Biden talking a lot about what the Trump administration has already done. Joe Biden said the country has grown weaker, sicker, poorer, and more divided, more violent under President Trump. And he says Trump is the one trying to defund the police, when we know that's not the case. Biden has said this on more than one occasion falsely. It's you have to laugh when he says something like that. We know the president certainly defends our men and women in blue. He even said Joe Biden wouldn't even say the words law and order. You know, Biden can't even name a single law enforcement group that supports him. So there's a lot that we're seeing that Joe Biden is trying to place on the president, that the president has actually improved over the 4 years that he's been in office, and Biden is trying to claim credit for it.
Jen, I would say that was going to be my second moment of the night when President Trump said, name one law enforcement agency that supports you, Joe. We have time. And of course, Wallace doesn't call him on that, just goes to the next question, cuts off the president like he did for 98 minutes. I want to check in with our DC folks, John Hines and Christina Bobb, to get their opinion and take and commentary on tonight. I have a feeling it may be similar to what we just watched, in our opinion, but let's find out. John, Christina?
You mentioned Chris Wallace, and I don't know what the president would do if he didn't have a foil in the media. He really responds well. I think he's at his best when he has that sort of foil to spar with, as we've seen oftentimes in that White House briefing room. That seems to be an environment in which he thrives. So I think that maybe the president actually got the benefit of that exchange there when he was interacting with Chris Wallace. I think also we saw the Democratic playbook. Joe Biden kept coming back, circling back to these themes, basically 3 themes: COVID-19, race relations, and then also talking about the Affordable Care Act, ACA. So I think we're going to hear a lot more about that. He thought those would be winning themes, and I think that's part of the Democratic playbook going forward. And I would say that the president, I think, was successful in circling back and trying to bring the conversation back to the economy. Tried to do that several times. And that, once again, is his strength. There was a Rasmussen poll out earlier this week. In answer to this question, where are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, that old Reagan question, 49% of the registered voters responding said that, in fact, they are better off now than they were 4 years ago. That's compared to 42% who said they are not. So that redounds to the president's benefit. It redounds to his management of the economy. That's still a very strong factor working in his favor. He tried to emphasize that tonight, circled back to that several times throughout the evening. And I'm wondering if our host of the weekly briefing, what she has to say, or if she agrees at all, or maybe she has a different take on the whole thing.
No, I do agree. The debate I thought was actually really frustrating to watch. I didn't think it ever really got into a rhythm of really understanding where each side stood on the different issues. I would say that's the moderator's responsibility to make sure that each side gets the opportunity to make their point and to rebut the opposition. And I didn't feel like that got to play out in this one. So I'm not sure that the viewers actually understand the issues any better after watching that debate. I think there was a lot of back and forth. I do think President Trump had better points to make and more facts. He used more specific facts than Joe Biden did, but he wasn't really able to hit those points hard because he would get cut off for time, or there would be another question coming up. And I think it really let down the viewers from the ability to actually just understand what each side was trying to say. So to that extent, I think the moderator really helped out Joe Biden because he wasn't able to get in. President Trump wasn't able to get into his rhythm. As far as the actual performance went, I thought Joe Biden looked in the camera more, which I don't know if the viewers liked that or not, but he looked like he was trying to speak directly to the viewers. President Trump was a little bit more natural. He would look at Chris Wallace, he would look at Joe Biden, and he wasn't specifically looking at the camera, which that kind of depends on what the viewers like, if you want that direct talk or if you want it to look a little bit natural. I'm not sure how that's going to play with people. I do think Joe Biden may have lost some of the small business owners who might have supported him. He was talking about raising taxes and raising corporate taxes and seemed to be really proud of that. I don't know how some of the business owners are going to feel about that, but we will see.
Yeah, I wish there was a fact checker on a lot of that stuff that was said because, number one, Wallace would not hold Biden to task on the question of SCOTUS. Will you and the Democrats try to stack the courts? Will you be adding Senate seats and try to turn D.C. into a state, which would add 1 or 2 more Senate seats so they can try and take over the Senate? He didn't answer the question. There was so many times throughout this 98 minutes where Biden was asked a direct question by the moderator and was never then called for not answering it. The second, within 20 or 30 seconds of the president being asked a question by Wallace, Wallace would interrupt and either give a counterpoint to the Biden side or try and fact check him. But there was none of that going on with Mr. Biden. I have a big issue with voter integrity because this is what it's going to come down to. One of the last questions was, will you, and this has been played now as a narrative in the mainstream media since last week, that the president won't go peacefully. Well, that's just BS, folks. He said it tonight. He will if the election is proven to be fair. And everyone knows, to this point, we have seen voter fraud. And yet, Mr. Biden claimed time and time again, there is no evidence of fraud. And then Wallace backed it up and said there isn't. How can the American people see stories, not only on our network, but others that dare to report it, and show you voter fraud happening, and then listen to a candidate for the highest office in the land say voter fraud doesn't exist? He's lying right to your face on live television, and then he wants you to go vote for him. I have a problem with that.
No, I think you bring up a good point. I think, for example, people who are in Pennsylvania and they saw what happened in their local community, they know what happened. They don't necessarily get their news from Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. These are local stories. Yeah, exactly. But I think it raises a bigger question, too, of what happened tonight, because we say that the two candidates didn't necessarily get their message out there in the right way, but we were talking that 3 to 6% of people don't have their minds made up. Did any votes change tonight? I'm not sure if they did. I don't think anybody
Probably
got the
not.
opportunity to get them out there. And in fact, I think Christina's going to have a lot of viewers on her show this weekend, which coincidentally airs at the same time as Chris Wallace is. So I think that is something where people are going to maybe tune in to get that type of information more so, because you're exactly right. I mean, I hate to say this about Chris Wallace, someone who's known as a respected journalist and one with experience, but I mean,
Alex.
there was a clear agenda tonight, or maybe not agenda is the right word, but he just didn't have a grasp of the facts or the other side of some of these arguments, and I think that was problematic tonight.
Totally.
Yeah, you could see the bias there. And John and I have been around a little bit longer. Chris was a very respected journalist. I don't put him in that category any longer after tonight's performance. John and Christina, we're going to let you go because we know you're several hours ahead than we are out here. So final thoughts from you guys before we let you get some rest tonight.
Well, I think that the surprising thing, I think one thing we did hear from Joe Biden, and obviously they've been doing some polling and he got the memo. He talked about violence in the urban centers. He admitted that there's no place for that. It seems like that has become an issue that the Democrats have picked up on, and now they've put out the talking points, and apparently he got a copy of the talking points, which he used tonight. So the agenda has moved towards the president, at least in that respect. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And Dan, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the fact-checking was lacking from the moderator. Joe Biden raised several points that were just baseless and completely false, particularly when he was talking about manufacturing, saying that he brought manufacturing back to the United States when he clearly sent most of the jobs overseas. President Trump has worked hard to bring manufacturing back, and he wasn't called out on that. And it appeared that there were several topics like that Joe Biden was basically just counting on the viewers to not actually know the truth. And I don't think the debate helped sort that out tonight.
No, not, and I will agree with you, Christina. This whole thing was to use a younger phrase, a hot mess. It really was. I don't think that the 3 to 5% in that latest poll that said they may be swayed by tonight's debate, that 3 to 5% left,
They might be more confused.
They might be more confused. It may have confused some people that were decided. I don't know. But it was literally a hot mess. And again, I throw it back on the moderator. The president, of course, has a tendency to butt in and get his point across. But when you're being, thank you guys, by the way, we'll let you go to sleep. When you're being berated, when you can tell that a moderator is biased to the other candidate, and I could tell it, we were chatting about it within the first 7 or 8 minutes. I was watching the time, I was watching when he would break in and cut off the president versus barely ever cutting off Vice President Joe Biden. The bias was there immediately within the first few minutes and then the entire 98 minutes. So I don't think the American people got a fair shake of this debate to hear actual policy that's been put into place under the President Trump administration versus Joe Biden's 47-year record, which again, when the president called him out for it and said, show me proof, let's talk about it, where has your policy that you created as a senator, as vice president, how has it helped race relations? How has what you've done in 47 years, Joe, helped the economy, helped small businesses? He had no answer. He would walk around it, glaze over it, go attack Trump, and then Wallace would be right there to lift him up and keep it going and interrupt if the president tried to fight back with proof that his record actually is better in 47 months than Joe's 47 years.
And we talked about what the message would be coming out of tonight, too. What soundbite would be taken away that'll be used by MSNBC and CNN. I think in that regard, I think it's going to be the one where Chris Wallace asked President Trump to condemn white supremacy. I've already seen on Twitter that a lot of people are saying it wasn't strong enough, so I think that was something that we could expect. I think on Fox News, for example, maybe One American News as well, they're going to focus on the fact that Joe Biden didn't have a response for a lot of these allegations, especially when it came to Hunter Biden. But I'd be watching out this week, too, to see if there's maybe a conversation in the media about not having another debate. I mean, that's the type of review that we're getting coming out of tonight where nobody got information. It didn't seem to help anybody at all. I'm willing to bet that maybe those in the media are going to start saying, do we need a second and third debate? And especially if this is where we stand in the polls right now, because I think we know who that favors right now.
I think it is interesting. Next week, we do get to hear from the vice presidential candidates. And let's talk about Pence versus Trump for a second. Vice President Mike Pence is your typical politician, has been in politics for a very long time. He's polished. You hear him give a speech, and he'll give the same speech multiple times, but it sounds like a new story that he's coming up with in that moment. He's good at that. He's good at getting the Trump message across. Kamala Harris is a junior senator, hasn't been in politics as long as Vice President Mike Pence, but I think next week you might see a little bit more policy. You might see a little bit more of the actual issues being discussed, because you don't have these two high-profile candidates that are trying to get digs at each other and fight with each other. So it'll be interesting to see how different the vice presidential debate is next week compared to this first debate this week.
I'm hoping that we get a very, very good point, Greta. I hope that we get some policy from the vice president. I don't know if President Trump didn't want to throw more out, or he felt that he had to be so combative because he was being cut off, because he was being interrupted. He could tell that the moderator was being biased right off the bat. Alex, you brought up that one where he said, I guess I'm debating you, to Wallace, because it literally, there was back and forth so much between the moderator and the president, but not between the other candidate, that I think people were just probably infuriated with the whole thing. And will they want to watch debate 2, debate 3? One
policy issue, of course, that I've paid attention to closely is the economy. Our viewers know that's my thing. That's my bread and butter. And I saw a lot of, I saw a lot of hypocrisy and back and forth from Joe Biden. He was slamming President Trump on closing the U.S. economy down during the coronavirus pandemic.
Thank you.
But then also criticizing President Trump for reopening the U.S. economy during the coronavirus pandemic. He says, you know, you shut down this economy. You put us in this recession. This is your fault. Every Democrat leader was saying, we need to shut down this economy. We need to shut down businesses, and we need to keep people at home so we can beat this virus. So it's this line that Biden was writing of, this is your fault, that we're in this recession because of you. It's also your fault that more cases of the virus are spreading because you're reopening too soon. And Biden has himself said, if I'm elected president, I will shut down the entire U.S. economy.
He also said he'll look and see if it's a constitutional right of his to make everybody wear masks.
But then criticizes President Trump for doing exactly what Democrats
The word you're looking for, Greta, is hypocrite.
Yes.
What the Democrats have done to this president since COVID broke out, and since the president took action in January when he closed down travel to China and then to Europe a couple months later, is what? They first called him a racist and a xenophobe. He pointed that out. Wallace gave him a couple seconds to point that out. Then, like you said, over the summer, they switched gears and said, you didn't close down the economy fast enough. And you heard Joe do it tonight. First say you've misstepped on everything when it comes to COVID, and that you shouldn't have done this, but then you did this and you shouldn't have done that. They are total hypocrites when it comes to the COVID process and what has went in place. And when you hear from these scientists like Dr. Fauci, who we've been told since day one is the foremost expert, right? We were told by the left, by the media, you listen to Dr. Fauci like he is God on COVID. He switched back and forth. How long does it stay on surfaces? What were we told, guys? 24 hours, 5 days, a week. Oh, back up, barely at all. Wear masks. Fauci, don't wear masks. Nope, wear masks. So the foremost experts didn't know what we were dealing with. And a president has to look at the economy and the health of the American people. Weigh the two, as you heard the president say tonight, and the director of the CDC said under testimony a month or two ago to Congress, there will be more deaths with a continued shutdown of our economy by the shutdown than COVID will ever result in deaths.
And it's letting,
it was stated.
And it's the issue of letting the cure be worse than the virus. At some point, you have to weigh that impact. And Joe Biden has lost a lot of support from business owners with his tax plan, as Jenn or Christina, one of them, mentioned that when you look at what President Trump has done for business owners in the U.S., he has brought jobs back to America. But a lot of those companies that have come back to America will leave again if President Biden were to raise taxes.
Yeah, we all remember the magic wand statement. Remember that President Obama made with his vice president, Joe Biden there? Manufacturing jobs will not come back to America. What's he going to do? Does he have a magic wand? That's what President Obama said.
And the old Democrat message of, hey, Obama created more jobs than you did. Well, yeah, Obama inherited a completely dead economy. Of course, he just, as President Trump said, you flip on the light switch and it happens.
Kind of like the performance
he inherited
tonight
a growing
that we talked about
economy
with Joe.
and expanded the growth that he had already inherited.
And what's problematic,
and he had 8 years to do it.
Right.
He's been in 3.5.
But
over.
Why are we having the conversation about this tonight? And that is problematic with me tonight at the debate, is that it almost seemed like both of the campaigns geared this for the Twitter crowd a little bit. I mean, these aren't issues that they talked about that necessarily affect the American people. I mean, I wanted to hear more about the economy. Why was NAFTA bad for Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio? They don't know that.
Which Biden backed.
Exactly. I mean, I know that our viewers are very smart. They can pay attention to the news and all that, but those undecided voters are people who presumably
Why
don't.
don't we hear more about the 94 crime bill when Wallace brought up crime and protest and violence and racism? Trump tried and said the 94 crime bill, and they glazed right over it. Don't forget who was an author of that, who pushed it through under the Clinton administration in 94, which again put more minorities behind bars for longer periods of time. That was Joe Biden, folks. That was not President Trump. There was no substance there. He had to bring those things up, and Wallace then would just glaze over them and move on to the next question.
No, I mean, Chris Wallace, I think, is the problematic thing that we're coming out of the night talking
100%.
about. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a performance that, I mean,
To me, that's the story of the night.
those on the left and the right are talking about it, and that is something that you do not want to be having a conversation of coming
No,
out
I mean,
of the
he
debate.
went into this saying, I want to be invisible on the debate stage, and 100% the story coming out of tonight is Chris Wallace definitely was not invisible as the moderator on this debate stage.
Guys, they're wrapping us up. Real quick, any final thoughts, final statements you thought that'll really stand out tomorrow? What are we looking for at the next one if we get another one?
I mean, we have 1 month until the election. It's go time for these two candidates. And I think that if the Trump campaign wants to focus on an issue, it's got to be an economic recovery, something they need to hammer home over the next
It's
month.
the economy, stupid. I mean,
Yeah.
it comes down 100% to the economy and who can fix it. Voters in that Monmouth poll yesterday said the economy is their top issue. That's my thing. That's what voters want to
And
hear
you
about.
just saw protesters out in New York City, one of the most liberal cities and states around, run by Democrats, governor and mayor, literally protesting open restaurants back up, open businesses back up. I think that folks are now getting to the point where they're so frustrated with this lockdown in these
2016
liberal
came down
states.
to what candidate is going to let me feed my kids? How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to get my job back? And that was President Trump. And that's totally the issue.
And I think they'll stick with him again. All right, we got to thank everybody. Alex Salvi, Greta Wall, our team back in D.C. We had John Hines, Christina, Bobb, and of course Jenn Pellegrino in Cleveland tonight. We want to thank you so much. That does it for OAN's special coverage of the first 2020 presidential debate. I'm Dan Ball.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.